Welcome back. Today we are going to be working on converting fractions into decimals. And more specifically, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a fraction. I'm going to give you an image. Remember that fractions are part to whole comparisons. All fractions are part to whole comparisons, and all fractions are division problems. So we're going to take that fraction, we are going to write it as a division problem, do some long division, and determine what it would be in decimal form. And then we're going to take that decimal, and the last step is to convert it to a percent. So we're going to go from fraction to decimal to percent, and we're really just going to connect what we know in mathematics. Mathematicians are all about making connections to make sense of what we're doing. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to see how they all connect together and how we can convert fractions into decimals. Now I'm going to give you a picture. That's what you're going to start with. You are going to write the fraction based off of what you see in the picture. So we'll go from the fraction, and then you're going to convert it into a decimal, and from there we'll write it as a percent. So use the image to determine the fraction, decimal, and the percent. Okay, so remember that all fractions are part to whole comparisons. So we want to look at the whole bar or the whole picture and count how many pieces. The whole is how many, the denominator is always telling us how many pieces are in the whole amount. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces in the whole amount, and then the numerator tells you the part that you get, which is in orange. And I have 1, 2, 3. So you get 3 out of the 4 pieces. So our fraction is 3/4. And all fractions are division problems. 3 divided by 4, which is the same as 3 divided by 4. So 4 does not go into 3, so we add a 0 and a decimal point. Drop in our 0. Excuse me. 4 goes into 30 7 times, right? 7 times 4 is 28. 30 minus 28 is 2. 4 does not fit into 2, so I drop in another 0. But 4 goes into 20 perfectly, nice and perfectly for us, 5 times. So 5 times 4 is 20, and now we have a terminating decimal. We have our answer, 75 hundredths. Okay, and remember the way we say it is also how you can write it. This is the tenths, this is the hundredths place value. The 5 is in the hundredths place value, which is the same as the fraction 75 hundredths, which as a percentage is 75%. Or you can take your decimal, 0.75, and multiply it times 100 because it's out of 100, and you can do all of the math, or times 100 is the same as moving it 10 times the place value, 100 times the place value, so 2 decimal points, which gives us 75% again. So 3/4, the fraction 3/4 is the percent, 75%. Let's do number 2 here real quick. So let's look at our picture. Remember, all fractions are part to whole comparisons. The part is the numerator, the whole is the denominator. So that's telling us how many pieces are in the whole amount. Let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The dot didn't show up. So there are 6 slices in the whole pie or pizza. But the part that you get is what's shaded. So 6 minus that 1 slice means you get 5 of those slices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the fraction 5/6. And remember, all fractions are division problems. 5 divided by 6. So 5 divided by 6. And we're going to say 6 goes into 5 0 times. So I add my decimal and drop in a 0. 6 goes into 50, so let's see, 6 times 6 is 36, so that's too small. 6 times 8 is 48, so let's try that. 48, I have 2 left over. 6 does not go into 2, so I'm going to drop in another 0. 6 times 3 is 18. So that gets us close to 20. 3 times 6 is 18. I subtract, I get a 2. Uh-oh. So I'm going to start recognizing a pattern. I bring down, I have a 20 again. So it's going to go in 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. And now we know that this is a repeating decimal. So remember, this is the tenths place value, the hundredths, thousandths place value. So it would be 83 hundredths, or we can think of this as 83.3 repeating percent is how we would write that. Okay, 83.3 repeating percent. Okay, for our first set of practice problems, we are going to start here by filling in the box, each of the boxes to find the percent. So you can see that progression that I was speaking of earlier. We're going to start with what we know about fractions, convert them into decimals, look at what that looks like visually in a hundreds grid, create equivalent ratios, and then finally we'll write what our percent is, what is 1/5 as a percentage. So remember that all fractions are decimals, and 1/5, okay, a fraction is part over a whole. This is the part. 1 out of 5 is the whole amount, and 1 divided by 5 is what the fraction is. So the 1 goes on the inside of the 10. 1 divided by 5 is our divisor. And so then we say 5, can 5 go into 1? No, it cannot. So we add our decimal point and drop in a 0. 5 goes into 10 2 times. So 2 times 5 gives me 10, and it goes in exactly. So as a decimal, the way we say this decimal is 2/10, which is also how I could draw it in my hundreds grid. So you can see that there are 100 tiny squares here, not cubes, and each row, or this would be column, I guess, has 10, right? Going up and down. So right, what I just shaded in would be 2/10, yes? Okay, that's what 2/10 would look like. But if I counted each of these tiny squares, okay, the tiny squares, if I counted them all up, this would actually be 20 out of the 200. So we already have 2 equivalent fractions that we can now write in our next column. We have 2/10, because I'd have 2 strips of 10, is also equivalent to 20 hundredths, okay, which is also equivalent to our starting fraction, 1/5, okay? And you can also sort of see the, when we talked about equivalent ratios, we talked about what that progression looks like, which you can create them by multiplying or dividing the same, the numerator and the denominator by the same number. And we can see that pattern here when we go from 1/5 to 2/10 to 20 hundredths. From here, I multiply times 2. And so 1 times 2 gives me 2, 5 times 2 gives me 10. From here, I multiply times 10. 2 times 10 is 20, and 10 times 10 is 100. So those are 3 equivalent ratios. Can you think of any more? Let's finally finish off by writing our percent. So we know as a decimal, 1/5 is 2/10, and we know in our hundreds grid, it's 20 out of 100, which that's how we write percentages out of 100. So that equals 20%. You could also look at your decimal and increase it, multiply it times 100. So 0 and 2/10 times 100, and that's the same as moving your decimal point 1 2 times. So again, we get 20%. All right, let's do one more problem. We're going to do 1/3. So remember, all fractions are division problems. This is 1/3, which is the same as, let's change it to my highlighter, it's the same as 1 divided by 3. Okay, the way we say it is the way you write it. So 3 does not go into 1. So I put a 0 and my decimal point, drop in another 0. 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 equals 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. 3 can't go into 1, so I add in another 0, and I have 10 again. So I say 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. And then we're going to start to notice a pattern that every time it's going to be 10. And we call this, which was one of our vocabulary words, a repeating decimal. The 3's will continue to repeat. Okay, so instead of writing 3 over and over, we can just write 0.3 with the line above it. That's the repeating sign. Okay, so now what does this look like in our hundreds grid? And 1/3, so we have 0.3 repeating, which technically this is 3/9 as a fraction. It's not in tenths because it's repeating. But we're gonna take you since it's out of 100, let's fill in 33 squares. Okay, so also you can think of place value. This is the tenths place value, so that's a fraction over 10. So, and like I said, if it wasn't a repeating decimal, if it's just 0.3, we would write that as 3/10. Anything that's repeating is actually over 9. And then 33, this is the hundredths place value, so it would be 33 hundredths. And actually it would be 99 since it's repeating. So we're going to fill in 33 squares. 1, 2, there's 30, 1, 2, 3. And then 0.3 repeating because the 3 is going to keep on going. Okay, and we're not going to be able to draw that. So equivalent ratios. So 1/3 we said right here is actually equivalent to 3/9. Okay, and that pattern would be times 3 times 3. Okay, and 3/9, if you divide it out in your calculator, it will give you repeating decimal. And as a percentage, we can reference back to what we just did here. Out of 100, remember all percents are a fraction part to whole comparison, but the whole amount is always 100. And so it would be 33.3 repeating, right, would be as a percentage. So I would write it 33.3 repeating percent. So today we covered how to go from a fraction, convert that fraction into a decimal using division, and then from decimal to convert it to a percentage. So from fraction, decimal to percent is what we worked on today. So nice job. Remember, you can always rewatch these videos, and if you want a full length lesson and tutorial on how to convert fractions into decimals, make sure you check out the link in the description. And for more weekly math tutorials, go ahead and subscribe for future lessons. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.